Alright guys, welcome back to part 2 of my Tesla 369 Triad explanation as a map of consciousness. If you haven't seen the first video, I suggest you watch that one first for context. So the first half of this video is going to be just focused on the math and exploring the Triad further, and then the second half of the video is going to be relating this to conscious function within your own brain, specifically around manipulation and how to tell the difference between a concept that has been backed up numerically and something that is actually fundamentally true, which is how you get manipulated, basically. So I'll put timestamps in the description as well as video chapters if you want to skip straight there. Otherwise, let's jump straight into it. So in the last video, we talked a lot about the waveform functions of numbers, and how if you take 9 from a spot on the graph to the oscillation point, all of a sudden the frequency balances itself out. So where do we take this knowledge of 9 being this inflection point, this mirror point, right? What do we do with that? Well, we can come over here when I find it. We can come over here to our buddy, remember him from the other video? And we can realize, oh, I see a 9. He's not supposed to be there. And you wag your finger at him. You know, wag your finger at him. And you go, okay, so where do we put 9? Well, let's just delete his ass and just see what happens. So that's what we do. We delete 9. Immediately, we find that 9 belongs in the middle because there's an intersection. Wow, we found 9's home. That's crazy. It found himself. It's almost as if 9 has to be present. You don't really get a choice. You can't exclude this motherfucker. Furthermore, each side should be the mirror, right? That's almost lined up. Bang, we have 2 different sides. Now notice, they should be equal, right? They should equal 9. Well, do they? Yes, because 1 plus 8 equals 9, 2 plus 7 equals 9, 3 plus 6 equals 9, and 4 plus 5 equals 9. Furthermore, look at the lines. This line here on the edge, for example, its mirrored line is this other line here. So what is 4 plus 2? That is 6, right? Well, what is 7 plus 5? 7 plus 5 is 12, which breaks down to 3, because 1 plus 2 is 3. So they are mirrored to make 9. Same over here, this line here. 7 plus 8, that's 15. 1 plus 5 equals 6. And what is 1 plus 2? 3. So 6 and 3 on either side. And same with this intersectional line. 5 plus 1 equals 6. And then 4 plus 8 equals 12, which breaks down again 1 plus 2 equals 3. So they're mirroring. Not only that, but we're getting the 3, 6 that seems to be excluded mirrored here. 3, 6, 3, 6, 3, 6. Isn't that crazy? It's all just balancing itself out. It's almost as if with the illusion that you're multiplying your awareness or fracturing your awareness, right? Because that's what the function is. The illusion is that you're separating yourself from the higher function, right? There's no God loop, because that's what 369 is implied to be, right? There's no 369, the mystical triad. Well, there actually is. It's just not always presenting in the way that you expect. But there is some very big structure here. All right, let's continue. So here we've got our little halved numbers again, our friends, when you take 1 and you half it. But as you can see, I've got some colored columns. Now the first column that you'll notice is the pink column. And you'll notice it's only 5s. And then the gray one is only 2s, right? It's interesting. And then the column after that has an alternating pattern of 1, 6, 1, 6, 1, 6, that green column. You might be saying to yourself, okay, well, why do these columns matter so far? Well, look at the 4th column, the one that's lavender colored. We have a pattern of 0, 3, 5, 8. 0, 3, 5, 8. 0, 3, 5, 8. So then we move on to the next column, which is the red column, and think, okay, are we seeing a pattern? And yes, we are. We see 0, 1, 7, 9, 5, 6, 2, 4. 0, 1, 7, 9, 5, 6, 2, 4. It repeats itself. And then we can just come over here instead of counting the numbers out on the pattern and look, the blue column also has a repeating pattern that is twice as long as the one prior. But not only that, there is also another pattern. So if we look here, 2 plus 5 equals 7, right? And then 1, 6. 1 plus 6 equals 7. Then we have 0, 3, 5, 8, which is 3 plus 5 equals 8, plus 8 equals 7. Again, in the red column, 1 plus 7 equals 8, plus 9 breaks back down to 8, plus 5 equals 4, plus 6 equals 10, which is 1 plus 0 breaks back down to 1, plus 2 equals 3, and 3 plus 4 equals 7. And again, with the top one here, you can do the math on your own if you want. I'm not. 3 plus 9 equals 12, which is 1 plus 2 equals 3, plus 7 equals 10, which breaks back down to 1, plus 8 equals 9, plus 1 again equals 10, which breaks down to 1, 1 plus 7 equals 8, 8 plus 5 breaks down to 4, 4 plus 5 equals 9, 9 plus 8 breaks back down to 8, 8 plus 4 equals 12, which breaks down to 3, 3 plus 2 equals 5, 5 plus 3 equals 8, 8 plus 6 equals 14, which breaks down 1 plus 4 equals 5, and 5 plus 2 equals 7. Isn't that crazy? I think the crazier part was I didn't actually have to do it like that. I just thought it would be funny. I could have just taken this number here, gone over to a calculator, and added it all together like this, and then just got 70, and then plus 7 and 0 together. But it wouldn't have been as fun. So I'm just editing this video now, and I wanted to jump in and just clarify, because it wasn't very clear at this point, that what I'm trying to say is for each digit column here, how we've got the pink, the gray, the green, the lavender, the red, and then the blue, right? We could reassign this next digit column another color, and that will be a repeating pattern that adds to the digital root of 7 that is twice the length of the pattern prior, and it will repeat indefinitely forever. So this would be a 32-digit long pattern, and then the next column after that would be a 64-digit long pattern that also has the digital root of 7 and is infinitely repeating. The next one would be a 128-digit long pattern that also has the digital root that breaks down to 7, so on and so forth. Every single digit column is just going to be a pattern that reoccurs that adds to 7 that always is double the length of the digit column prior's pattern. There is some very specific structure going on here. It just looks random. It is very far from random. So you might be thinking, okay, let's map these out. And if you're thinking that, that's what I thought too. You're a genius. You're a genius, mate. So this is what they look mapped out. A lot of noise, right? So let's take this graph and let's have a deeper look at it. Let's take it over here. What's going on? Well, first of all, we don't have 9 in the middle again. So maybe if we move 9 down there, the graph will start to balance itself out. So if you think that, you're learning, which is bad in this one specific instance because it's not what I did. No, there's already structure here. And actually, since nothing touches 9, if 9 was between 4 and 5, nothing gets rearranged anyway. So like it doesn't really matter. This is still structure. It's valid. So you might be thinking in your head, well, that's cool, I guess, that it's structure and it's valid, but it doesn't really matter unless you can find structure and validity in literally everything else. So am I proposing that I can take this structure here, come over here, and look at all of these numbers all the way through here and just decide that I'm going to take the last 3-digit columns and just not include them in the data pool and just assume that there is a diagonal wavelength running through these numbers that is completely separate from the rest of the numbers? That's quite a big claim. So how do I prove that? Well, have faith, my child. Before we get into trying to prove it, first I want to just make sure we're all clear as to what I'm trying to do. So what I'm proposing is that we can just take the last 3 digits from here and just completely rule them out as solved as a wavelength, and then just look for patterns in the remaining data, every other number. Now listen, I hear you. I know your brain might be screaming, that's stupid. That's not going to work. You can't just do that. Who said you can do that? That's against the rules. There's no way that's going to work. All of these numbers down here, you just take these ones away, and then all of a sudden everything balances out. That's stupid, bro. Get medicated. Right? That's what you might be thinking. Good. That's what I was thinking too. Good thing I didn't get medicated, because look at this. You actually come down here and we cross off our 5, 2, and 1, 6 alternating line because it's already valid structure here. And we add the digits of remaining. Should there be a pattern? Or are we shaking the pill bottles? What are we doing? What do we do? Pattern or pill bottles? Well, for the people who are quickly doing the math, if you come down here, you'll see there's pattern, which I find so funny that not only is there pattern, but it's 366399. 366399. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Does that sound familiar to anyone? Is that this exact structure right here minus the 8s and the 1s? You know, 366399. 366399. Just saying. So I've laid it out cleaner here. And something very interesting is when you break these down and you get the digital roots of these, since there's the 9, 9, and 3 on either side, and it's a nested frequency again, which is another hint, guys, it always is going to be nested. Whether or not you add it front to back or back to front, it's actually the same shape both times, which is this cool shape right here. Now you can then add this shape front to back and back to front, you know, the same way, and get these two shapes here and single it out if you wanted to. And these balance to 9 at any given point on here, by the way. This would all be green. But you don't really need to, right? Because this is just the valid wavelength. So even though it sounds stupid, right? The yellow side here is one wavelength on one side of the mirror point, and this side here is another wavelength on the other side of the mirror point, and they're slowly merging together or separate away depending on the perspective. And that's what these symbolizes, them either merge together or merge away. But they are coming. They are structured. Like, it is there. It's just starting to merge together into one. Right? It can just all be visualized like this. Sideways. So we just take them and go like that. And that's your numbers, bro. Because these numbers are always going to be, the back end numbers is always going to be 5. It's always going to be 2. And then 1, 6, 1, 6 oscillating. And then there's this pattern running up it as well. Like, that's all it is. It looks like a lot of noise. I get it. This looks complicated, but this is actually just this. That's all it is. It's just like remembrance, the pattern of remembrance, and then the God loop. This is all it is. So, now we're moving into the second half of the video, which is a lot more abstract. Get out of here. Get deported. This part's going to be a bit more abstract. So we're going to be looking at what the number 9 would look like within your mind. So as we can see that even within seemingly really, really complicated structure with the numbers, the reality of what's actually going on behind the scenes is just these two patterns expressed through what seems to be randomization, but it's really not. It's just these two. Okay? So now we have to look for what these two things actually are within us. We can find them. So where do we go to find that out? Well, let's just compare them side by side for a second. So this is what it looked like. Oh, so this is what it looked like originally before we did anything to it. And then after we looked at the waves that run up in the pattern, we actually do see these two coming back and forward. So what's going on here? Well, they're clearly not the same because this is still just one number. It looks different because I've colored it, but it still is just one number. So what we're seeing the output here is actually this wavelength diffusing into this wavelength at any given point. So what we can actually do is come through with like a big line that just comes straight down. Actually, we'll do this, it's better. You know, we got this big line that comes straight down through them, and that line is like, I guess, this diffusion point where this slowly starts to turn into this, and they melt together. Right, where else have we seen that? That melting together ends up creating an output, and that output is the numbers. So it is two wavelengths getting passed through this layer here that lead to a singular output, which is the numbers that we perceive. This is like an interpretation layer. Where else do we see this? Well, we just see it over here as well, that with the number 9. It's the same thing, right? It's like this balancing point. We see the same thing over here. We get an equal diffusion on each point. You know, they're equally diffusing when they're perfectly balanced. So now we have to look for that same process, that diffusion process of two things turning into one within our own brain. So let's move over into a more abstract part of the video. Good luck. All right, for this next part of the video, it's going to be very abstract because I'm going to be describing a mechanic based on the numbers, based on the concept of we're looking for a mirror point within ourselves, and a lot of metaphors because we're explaining consciousness itself. So for this, you're going to have to like try follow the weirdness. Because you consider your mind as if it has two halves really quick. This is kind of how humans, the average person, sees the world. There's the egoic self side, that this is how you think, feel, your belief system, and then we have the external world. And on this side, what we consider to be facts about the external world are here. So if I was to come and tell you that this chocolate bar is worth $3, you would categorize that as the external world. You wouldn't categorize that as something within you, right? You'd consider that as a truth in the external world. But why is that? Because it's not actually true. The only reason that you consider it to be true is because it's relationally true to some concepts. There are some concepts that you are getting reinforced through the numerical value, because that's what it is. Now, remember when I said that numbers are kind of like this internal map of your brain? Because if you have an idea within your brain, like you wanted to build a castle, the only way for you to get the idea and the design of the castle out of your head is through one of two mechanics. There is geometry, which is what humans used for a very long time, and then there is mathematics, which is more nuanced. But both of them were internal structures first. Shapes existed before we were interpreting the world with shapes. Okay? Numbers existed, or numerical value existed, before we conceptualized the concept of numbers as an external thing that we count. Like there was 9 horses in the paddock before anyone was counting what 9 meant. You see what I'm saying? So these conscious mechanics that originally were birthed within our brain, which originally come from our brain, get structured and captured through the symbolic representations of what they are. But internally they're still representing and present. So what are the functions? Well, when it comes to truth, this is a really big one. We have misinterpreted numerical value because we've now made it external to see the world in the internal and external way. That's the problem. The numbers are the reason that we have an ego problem, or at least part of the reason, this one big chunk. This is a piece of the puzzle. Because we have put everything that is numerical outside of our head, we're forgetting that they're coming from inside of our head. If you have a structure that you want to build and you want to give it the units of measurement, it doesn't matter whether you're using metric system meters, or if you're using the imperial system with feet, or if you're using your own made up 300,000 chicken eggs long. It doesn't matter, okay? Because you have to assign the numerical value function. But since we've taken it and we've projected it out, and we somehow managed to convince ourselves that just because the concept can be backed up with numerical value, that somehow the concept is true. But the fact that we can logically use the numerical function to interpret a concept doesn't mean it's true. Hear me out. So splitting our brain in half, like the screen here, with the line in the middle, we see that the line in the middle is numerical value. The difference between the external and the internal world is the concept of numerical value, right? So now we're building structures within your awareness, because you can go away from this and think about it and rewire your thinking. This is building structure. Now we're adding structure to your awareness. And this is how you take back control of your own thoughts, because when you build structure in your awareness, what's really going on is you've now picked a concept that you want to believe in, which hopefully is this, or hypothetically is this, and then you start revisiting it in your mind to add your own numerical value, and that is recursion that builds gravity. What do I mean by that? I mean, next time you go out and someone in public comes up to you and says some bullshit about how their concept is real and then they just give you a bunch of numerical value, you can look at them and go, actually, the numerical value is fucking useless. Piss off, first of all, because the concept's stupid. Like you can have another layer of discernment because you're not falling for one of the biggest hooks within the human psyche, and that is the pressure that the gravity of numerical value puts on your psyche to conform to the concept as if it was a truth. It was never a truth, and the numerical value means nothing. Do not fall for it. And just before I end this video, if anyone wanted to know how I came to these conclusions, because I know there's going to be one or two of you that really, really want to know, it's hard to explain. I kind of just see it, you know? But the best way to approach it when you're looking at the numbers like this, if you wanted to experiment with the triad and try to find your own conscious mechanics that you can share, try look for the features and what they're actually doing to extrapolate out. Okay, so in this example, we've got two clear sides. And how do we predict the next digits? So we know the last three digits of the next number is going to be 125. How do we know that? Because of the numerical value of it repeating over and over. So on one side, we've got the numerical value, and on the other side, we have what seems to be a concept or random. This noise seems random, but in actuality, right, it's a pattern that runs through 366399. And that symbolizes how a concept without coherence, emotional harmonic coherence, is nothing more than a lie. It can't sustain. Oh, yeah, and by the way, this does prove that reality is an organic, nested, self aware frequency simulation. Have a nice night.